By Democratic Congressman John Yarmuth of Kentucky and Republican freshman Congressman David Schweikert of Arizona, who was also a bond trader in a former life.
Well,
Are you surprised that the bond market hasn't reacted more to the cacophony on Capitol Hill?
Actually, I've always been a little bit of a contrarian here, but more on the math side. When you look at the scale of liquidity that's out there, where it has to park, and sort of looking at some of the default futures and those, there hasn't been that much movement. Think of that. The 10-year benchmark today is lower than it was a week ago, which may demonstrate that the markets aren't happy with us, but the liquidity forces them into sovereign debt.
They have basically no other choice for high-grade securities in bulk. Congressman Yarmuth, you were talking a moment ago as we were coming into the segment that you're hearing from your constituents. They're angry. They're angry about the level of spending. They're angry about taxes, but they're also angry about the spectacle here.
They can't believe that we are operating in this way. I've made the point a number of times. The idea that we would be contemplating significant changes in very important programs, institutions like Medicare and Social Security, behind closed doors, with a gun at our heads, a date certain, and these talks are being done in secret. We shouldn't be doing business this way. They understand this is a politically induced crisis. They know that we've raised the debt ceiling 77 times since the Kennedy administration, and that this is being used in a different way. But I think mostly they say, how in the world can you not compromise? Can both sides not get together and do this stuff? And I agree with them. Somebody said job approval of Congress is at 10%. I'm trying to figure out who those idiots are in the 10%.
Congressman Schweikert, you're a freshman member here, and the freshmen on the Republican side have been instrumental in pushing the debate the way it is, using the debt ceiling as a lever, a bludgeon. You choose your metaphor here.
Well, let's stick with lever.
Let's stick with lever to get the country to discuss the deeper issues, which are ongoing long-term fiscal soundness. Is it right to do that, to link the two, number one? And number two, do you have time still to come up to that with those long-term solutions?
Brilliant question, phrased absolutely perfectly. For a lot of us, this is much more than a discussion about the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is actually sort of part of the sideshow. It is the fact we are going to be crushed both by the rating agencies, but just by the sheer magnitude of the debt. But yet, as you've learned in this place, unless you have that leverage, the conversation isn't going to happen because it's very uncomfortable.
Well, it's uncomfortable because these cuts go to the core of what Congress does.
Well, they do, and one of the things we're looking at, hypothetically, if this default crisis, were to go a month, we would be taking $130 billion out of the economy. It just evaporates. That's 10% of GDP. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of pain on this country at a time when we can't afford it.
Congressman Schweikert just made that you use the lever that's available to you. And a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't link the debt ceiling debate to that longer term thing. But if that's the only tool that's available to you, can you blame them?
Well, here's the
Because nothing else has worked.
Here's one of the ironies. Every one of the Republicans in the House, except 6, and Dave was one of them, voted for a budget which increases the national debt by $6 trillion over the next 10 years. So they've already voted to increase the debt ceiling, essentially. I mean, you can't reconcile that budget with now saying we're not going to raise the debt ceiling. So it is a politically manufactured crisis. I understand that they're trying to use leverage, but leverage only works to a certain point, and then you've got the national interest that you have to pay attention to. And that's where we are.
And the Congressman and I obviously have a disagreement on the national interest. Do you wake up a couple years from now and say, we're Greece, we're Portugal? That is where we're heading. And if you look at the scale and the speed of the debt curve, particularly if you look at something of the president's proposed budget, it is devastatingly ugly. And a lot of it is actually, on that side, is premised on completely fictitious GDP growth that isn't happening. So the numbers are actually much, much worse.
Growth is our underlying problem, I think. Growth is our underlying
problem.
Absolutely. Am I right in assuming you will vote against the Boehner plan as you see it, and you will vote
I'm holding out to the last moment to see if I can get one last item. So
an undecided and a no.
No, I'm going to vote against it. This is, to push this can essentially down the road for 6 more months to go through this all again at a time when it will require another $1.6 trillion worth of cuts, which obviously will come from entitlement programs without any request of the richest people in this country and oil companies to make any contribution. No, and it's going to be defeated in the Senate tonight.
Congressman Yarmuth, Congressman Schweikert, we have to leave it. I'm sorry, we got to leave it there. We'll have you back. So when you figure out what you're going to do, we'll have you back.